Hey guys, my guest tonight, Mary Rodwell, and I will be talking about starseed children. Be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, happy Monday. At least it's Monday in the US, and I hope you guys enjoyed your 3-day weekend. To start a 4-day work week. It's not too bad, right? 4-day work week. Anyway, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal problem or you think you have a paranormal problem, we can get you. It might take us a while because California is a huge state. A lot of people don't realize how big it truly is. But we will get you. And in the case that we can't get you, we do have sensitives and mediums on staff who can call you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on in your situation. And if it is paranormal, they can also calm the energy down until we can get out there. Usually it doesn't take us more than 2 to 3 days to get out there. Okay. But like I said, it's a big state. We got people everywhere. If you want to find us, just check us out on Facebook. We're everywhere on Facebook. We're over at, just Google us. Besides Facebook, Google us. You will find us. We are everywhere. All right, that being said, if you are watching from Facebook tonight, and a lot of you are, and you haven't done so already, and you like what you see and hear tonight, please feel free to follow, because I do shows Sunday through Friday every week, and it's a different guest every night. I don't like to focus on just one topic, so we may veer off topic, like I did last week talking about the opioid crisis. It just depends on the week. I'm a journalist. I'm a photojournalist. That's what I do. That's my real job, and I like to change it up a little bit, right? But otherwise, it's mostly stuff like tonight that we're going to be talking about. If you're watching from YouTube, please, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please be sure to do that if you like and see what you hear today. Again, it's free. Just go for it. Also, between Facebook and YouTube, if you like what you see, show me some love. Show me thumbs up. Show me happy hearts, happy faces, whatever. Just show me some love and comment in the chat room tonight. Because what that does is that puts us up higher in the FYP on both those channels, and that kind of makes the computer take notice of us, and it distributes us out further. Thank you for the thumbs up, whoever did that. Thank you. I'll pop right up. Yeah, so that helps, that helps get us out to more people, and that's the goal of this. Maybe you're sitting at home tonight, and for some of you, it's 9:30 in the evening, 6:30 here, and over in Australia, where we're going to be talking to our guest tonight, it's 12:30 over there noon, in the afternoon. So all these different, times that we go out. Well, maybe you're sitting on your couch, maybe you're having your lunch, who knows? But just sit back, relax, drink some coffee, hot cocoa, whatever. And I think you'll enjoy the show. And if you're at home tonight and you're sitting on your couch, dim the lights a little bit, kind of make it more spooky, right? And we're going to have a great time. My guest tonight, Mary Rodwell, I heard her on another show. And I've always found this whole linking with the tests they do on hybrids and starseed children fascinating. In fact, a few years ago, when I first started doing this show back, well, not a few years ago, around 13 years ago, I had a couple of starseed children on as guests, and it was a fascinating show. So when I saw and heard Mary on this other show, I was really excited to try and get a hold of her, because it's always been an interest of mine as far as, aliens and contactees go and all that. So I'm real excited to have her on. Just bear in mind that there was a storm whipping up around 9 o'clock tonight. Well, we probably won't hit it. 6:35 here, 9 o'clock our time tonight. If the power should go out, don't panic. Everybody just hang out here in the chat room. Mary, stay on. Everybody stay on, because what will happen is Mary will go first and foremost on the screen. I'll get my cell phone hooked up, get everything going, get the show, and get my part as being the hostess back up on this thing. I'll be doing it by lantern light, but the show will go on. All right. Okay, so without further ado, let me get Mary in here, and she can tell you about herself and we'll start talking about Starseed children. Here we go. Hello.
Hello, Charlotte. Lovely to see you, and what a pleasure it is to connect on the show.
This is cool. It's hard to believe that I could talk to you in Brisbane. I mean, this is like the coolest part of the job of what I do, because I can talk to people all over the world, and it's this easy.
Yeah, it is, and I find it quite incredible too, because I work with people all over the globe. All I need is Zoom or Skype, and I can do the same.
Absolutely. So tell me about you, ma'am.
Well, the shortened version is I used to be a nurse and a midwife once, a long time ago, but ended up training as a counselor and working with a whole range of what I call human issues, hospice, people, grief and bereavement, family issues and whatever, but ultimately got more interested in the spiritual component of
Mm-hmm.
who we are and what we are, becoming a hypnotherapist as well as a counselor, and working with people, not just with things to do with this life, but other past lives. But also with all of that is people's extraordinary experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And extraordinary, although they're not so extraordinary, I believe now, because too many people are having them. I think it's a lot more ordinary than extraordinary, is people that have had not only encounters with spirits, angels, fairies, or whatever, but also other non-human intelligences, which, can be a whole range of forms, including humanoids, but also those that I call interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, transdimensionals, and those from our future. So it covers the whole gamut of paranormal, which you would understand very well, Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I find it really interesting because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you talk about counselors, and psychiatrists and things like that, they didn't really they didn't really see this kind of thing. And when people would come in, there was always that stigmata that they were, loopy. But I've noticed, even with my friends that have gone to counselors, and even my mother from time to time, that the counselors became more and more open to it. How did that happen? Just out of
Well,
curiosity.
I think I wish it was even more so, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
because when I first came into this nearly 30 years ago now, most people didn't know where to go. They were afraid to
Mm-hmm.
go to psychologists or counselors, or afraid to go, obviously, to psychiatrists, because they were often as not given medication and told it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
real, etc., etc. But there's been a lot more openness in recent years, and those that have been in those fields have realized that they may very well have had similar kinds of experiences, for one. But secondly, if enough people are having these kinds of experiences, then maybe it's not such aberrant behavior after all. Maybe there's something real with this. And I blame a lot on the truth embargo on particularly the ET stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
it's because of that embargo on the reality that we're being visited, have been visited all through our history, that has made people question their sanity, when in fact it's been very real.
My mother had dementia, and so she would hallucinate every time she hallucinated. But she was one of the best psychics I had on my team. I can honestly say that my mother was really gifted, and I remember taking her in, to the emergency. And I didn't know how to approach the doctors either, because they'd say, "Well, is she hallucinating?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm a ghost hunter, and she
Yeah,
goes with us." So that depends how you classify hallucinations, because
yeah.
she's seen a lot of stuff that our regular psychics on the team see as well. So yeah, going through all that. I'm so glad there's people like you out there, that understand this now.
Well, it's frustrating for me, and always has
Mm-hmm.
been. We know that there's always been mediums, psychics, intuitives, and what have you. And
Mm-hmm.
they've all, they're sort of half accepted and half not accepted in
Mm-hmm.
mainstream society. It's become a lot more accepted now. I mean, the bottom line is, for science to tell us that we're only able to take as real from our five senses is ludicrous,
Mm-hmm.
because,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many studies, scientific studies on the quantum reality now, consciousness as being primary, that,
Mm-hmm.
people go out of body, astral traveling, all this kind of thing. People see things. They, they may take things like ayahuasca and have extremely profound experiences as well. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole range. Near-death experience is another one. There's all these different things that show that we're more
Mm-hmm.
than a physical, body, that we are able to go to other realms.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about star seeds a little bit. Like I said several years ago when I was on Block Talk Radio, I had Audrey, and I forget who the sister's name was. They used to do a lot of TV shows, and they claimed to be starseeds. What exactly is a starseed?
Well, I'd like to say that I think primarily a lot of these recent generations are star seeds, but we're all star seeds mostly in terms of the soul that's come from another place, and another place may be another star system. And many will say, you know, I feel like I came from the Pleiades, or my origin was Arcturus or another dimension or whatever. So that's how people understand their starseed origins. But if we go back to our DNA and the fact that we were, I believe, as many do now, that we were intelligently designed by at least 12 different star origins, we're all starseeds actually. It's just that it's a term now to say that we're not just, if you like, coming from a human perspective as a soul. We are in fact multidimensional and have had soul origins in other places as well as Earth.
Okay. When we talk about this topic, does this come from people? Does this come from just the alien DNA itself, or is this coming from the years and years of contactees and abductions there, where they were doing the so-called tests on everybody? Do you think?
Well, it's quite complex, I think. But what we've been told by the research is that at the beginning there were at least maybe 12 different species involved in creating Homo sapiens sapiens, maybe as many as 22. But since that time, those that identify as being hybrids, because that makes us hybrids anyway.
Right.
But what some people see the hybrid side of it as not just the father and the mother, but added ET-DNA from a particular intelligence. So they've got added DNA, which gives them that connection, if you like, to certain star systems as well. And many of the children, to give you an example of one 8-year-old had explained to me the fact that she was a hybrid water being human, and she explained that the planet she came from was a water planet, and when she looks at herself she sees the water being rather than the human being. And she explained that her abilities were that she could not only sense and hear music, but she could go to the frequency of that music right to the person who created it and the emotions involved in that. So they have these heightened abilities and multidimensional awareness. This is what I'm seeing in the more recent generations that are a lot more awake and have more activated, I believe, DNA.
And how do you have conversations with them? Obviously you're a counselor, so do they come to you, or how's that work? I mean, do they email you, or how do you come about meeting people?
Charlotte, it's a bit of both, really. A parent might write to me and say their child talks about going up on spaceships, or talks about who they are and where they've come from. And often the parents make quite clear that they haven't in any way influenced the child. The child's spontaneously coming out with this. So it may be an email to start, it may be a telephone call, or they may actually come and see me. But it's often the parents not knowing what to do with that because it's so unusual. And I have questionnaires, not just for adults, but one for children, which ask certain questions that give an indication that they are able to tap into more of the non-physical reality that we talk about.
Have you been able, like with the questionnaire or just for your interviews with the children, been able to see tell what happens when they are, or when they were aboard the ship, or are they still being like as they're growing up, are they still being taken aboard, or are they just left here?
Oh, it seems that those, even the adults in their 60s, 70s, and what have you, often they'll recall a certain type of experience, missing time, seeing craft as a child or whatever. Most seem to have interactions right from the very early years, could be 2 or 3 years old, but they may not be aware of it going through their lives. Some will have certain periods where they say, I think something happened there because I saw something and then I had missing time. So often there's a lifelong interaction, and also it's intergenerational, because I will find that either the mother of them or the grandparent has had experiences as well. So it seems to go down certain family lines, sometimes both parents, sometimes just one parent, where it comes down genetically to not only the young adult, but the children.
Is there a common thread in these abductions, do you think?
Well, let's put it like this. I don't call them abductions because there's a different connotation to that, okay?
Right. Okay.
Many of them will call themselves experiencers because it's an experience.
Of course, of course.
There are many those star seeds that don't see what they're having as abductions, but interactions with their star family, and they see it as very beneficial and very helpful to them, and expansive. So we've, and I think it's really important to say that when I was involved in the surveys that we did with 4,200 people with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, we discovered that out of that 4,200, 85% had a psycho-spiritual awakening and a very positive reaction to what had happened. They believe it enhanced their abilities. They believe it changed their philosophy into one that was a lot more harmonious with the planet. They would change their diet. They would become less materialistic. So a lot of really positive things. There was only about 15% that were very, very negative about it. And what your audience may not be aware is often that the reason for that is not so much their ET encounters, but the fact they've been interfered with by the deep state, military, MyLab kind of abductions, which are completely different and traumatize far more, in my view, than the ET side.
For the people that don't know what MyLab is, can you explain that?
It's basically military abductions. They have the technology to abduct people, and if they know that you've been having some interactions on board craft with certain star beings, they want to know what you know or what you've learned or what you've gained on board craft. So they will then abduct you. They have the same technology, and they can interrogate you, drug you, and get as much information as possible, and often traumatize you so you never talk about it. Because again, there's this big truth embargo on anything, so that you're mocked or derided and laughed at if you say, well, actually, I saw humans there and they were in lab coats or whatever. And that will be the one that's in fact been the most traumatic in many cases.
When people talk about this stuff, I mean, is it hard to obtain that information? I mean, do they have to go under hypnosis, or do some of them actually remember them, like they might have a dream or something? When it comes to them in a dream.
That's a very good question, and Charlotte, in the sense that for some people there'll be snapshots of memory. Some people have really good memory. Some will see it as a dream. And the reason that I know it's not a dream is often they've got all this details about their so-called dream many years after the so-called dream. And most dreams, as you know, disappear within a few minutes or seconds even. Whereas if something happened that's profound and real, you're still going to remember it 20, 30 years later. And this is what they will say, that, I still remember it as clear as anything, generally means it's not a dream and they were just in an altered state. And so you sort of interpret it as a dream, but it's not.
Now, you hear a lot of stories from people saying that once they are aboard a ship, that, or especially women, that they are brought a baby, to look at this baby, and they get the impression that the baby is their child. Is that more common than it's led on to be?
It's actually quite common. And in my book, Awakening, I wrote about missing pregnancies, the ones where people say, for a few months, I felt I was pregnant. Then all of a sudden, the symptoms just disappear. And what we've discovered is that many of those that have had these experiences are often taken up on board craft. And what happens is that they will be shown these babies. And there's a sense of recognition, an acknowledgement that they are one of theirs, but they've had extra ET DNA and are what we term the hybrids on board the craft as well. But there's been many women that have had these experiences and been shown, but not just women, men too have had their sperm taken, and they've been shown children and told that they were theirs. And it can be quite as very difficult emotionally to actually deal with that and what have you. But I've heard of some women saying they've had 20 pregnancies or whatever, some of them quite casual about it and what have you. And I met a woman in England who said she was one of those that went up on board craft and helped the mothers that were brought up to connect with their hybrid children on board craft. And she was quite sort of casual about it. She sort of said, that's what I do. That's my role on board. So there's a whole program there on that level as well, because apparently from our understanding is many of these intelligences seed other planets with different mixes of DNA. And I remember an 8-year-old telling me that she'd taken on board craft and she was shown this process. She was actually shown by the beings how they create different hybrid species to seed other planets. And they explained it all to her, and she was only 8, which is quite amazing that she was shown that. She was quite matter of fact about it. She also said that they taught her how to levitate and use her psychic abilities. And that was one of the other things she learned on board craft.
That's incredible. Now, I've also heard stories about women when this copulation happens, is that there are like holograms involved. A lot of, and a good portion of them, where they won't see the alien that's doing it. They will see just a beautiful human male.
They can certainly do that. The screens, they can certainly do that. Sometimes they will have some that look very, very human, but they will have some where the person has this, as you say, human looking being, not realizing that that's a screen. I mean, one of the things that isolates people who've had encounters, for example, is that they may be very scared of clowns or Santa Claus or owls with big eyes. And often when you get them to look again, they'll see a grey, for example. So often these can be a screen, just so that the person doesn't react in huge fear because of seeing this unusual being and think, oh, it's just an owl. Oh, but what's interesting is they're often scared of those images because underneath it all, there's an awareness they're not what they look like.
Right. Absolutely. And, when they are can you take me through the steps of just a situation where someone's taken aboard for that purpose? What have you found out or discovered that happens when they're taken aboard like that?
Well, one of the ways that, I work, sometimes there is conscious memory, sometimes there isn't. They may have a little bit of memory of it. But if I take them into an altered state, and it doesn't necessarily have to be deep trance either. People think they've got to be unconscious to remember stuff. No, they don't. They just need to be relaxed enough and trust you enough. I'll say, now I want you to go to the first time you had this particular experience. And they may say, oh, I'm 3 years old, or I'm 5 years old. And I get them to look at where they are. Are you outside, inside or outside? They often say, I'm outside and it's dark. And then I will say to them, so what do you notice in front of you? And they'll say, there's a light. Or I'll say, do you feel, is anyone else with you? And they may say, well, yes, I feel there's somebody else there. They often get levitated up by a light that takes them up onto the craft. And I'll say, where are you? They'll say, well, I'm in a room and there's a bed there, or it's metal bed or something like that. I'll say, what happens next? And they may say, well, they're on the bed. And I'll say, is there anyone else there? And they may say 2 or 3 different beings, or they could be little greys or zetas or other beings, a mantis being or whatever. And then they will say they're doing a procedure. Now, what you can do is find out when they're in that space, what that procedure is, and to actually have communication going, saying, well, what is that? What are they doing? Ask them. And they'll say, oh, they're checking me out. They do this ever so often, or they're taking a little bit of my genetic material to check other things or whatever. And they'll explain to them what's going on. So what's interesting is I often say, are any of them familiar to you? And often if they've had other experiences, they'll say, yes, this one on my right is familiar. Ask how many times they picked you up, and they'll reel off 2, 5, 7, and they'll go through. So you can get an enormous amount of information when they're in that space, because the subconscious then just brings it all up, because there's nothing getting in the way of that. Often then they're put down, or they've been told that they've been given some information that they'll find out and understand later down the track. Some of them will talk about going in. I remember an 8-year-old telling me that he gets taken up and he's in a group of other human children, but some children don't look human because their eyes are different. And he said, and we're shown how to use our minds, and we're shown complex information. And I remember saying to this 8-year-old, when you say complex, can you tell me what it is you get taught? And he just said to me quite calmly, well, it's too complex for you. In other words, I wasn't going to understand it. But how they can move energy, they learn how to change things. They learn how to communicate in different levels with telepathy, whole range of different things. And this is not just one child. There are other children that have talked about what they learn on the craft. So we've got an educational system, I call it space school, where they're taught a whole range of complex things apart from being monitored physically and what have you. Sometimes people don't realize that 50% of those surveyed actually had healing on board craft. That's 50% of 4,000 people had healing procedures. So there's a whole range of things that can happen. And this is what the MyLab and the deep state behind the scenes want to know. What are they being taught? What are they being shown? What are they up to? In other words, this is why they're so interested in experiences. And that's why some experiences get black helicopters outside and all this kind of thing, because they're being monitored, because often they know the people that are having experiences.
Well, you hear, the rumors about back in maybe the late 40s, early 50s, about an agreement being made between the U.S. government and the aliens. Do you think there was ever an agreement?
I think that it sounds like it's credible, because there's too many witnesses, whistleblowers that have said that. But what I need to say is it's very easy for people on the outside to think that all a particular type of species are wanting to say whether they're good or bad.
Right.
What I was told by one lady, that she knew of 150 or 162 species of grey. So what that indicates is there are obviously some that are self-serving, and there are obviously some where people have really loving interactions and feel very connected to them. So I think we have to be very careful about how we judge from limited information.
I would think that, there'd be a lot of species of aliens out in the universe. I mean, for this arrogant to think that it's just us floating out here, it's ridiculous. But you got to think about that too. It's like the U.S. You got the good eggs. You got, not the U.S. so much, but you know what I mean, around the world. You got the good eggs. You got the bad eggs. So and then there's, of course, our different races on here as well. So there's got to be that kind of stuff going on out in the universe.
Well, they say, as below as above, or as above as below, or whatever. I think that for me, I think it'd be very arrogant to even say, well, I think these are good, these are bad, or they're all good or they're all bad. I think that's naive. And it's also very arrogant to say that, because we don't know what we don't know. There's too much information that we need to make that kind of judgment, if you like. So all I can go on is what my clients tell me, how they feel about different beings, and whether or not for them it's been a positive experience or not. But often a very negative, scary experience can change when they understand more about their experience and find out that maybe it wasn't, something really evil at the end of the day, but something that was very positive for them, and vice versa. So when somebody comes to me, it's about them finding out for them what is the truth.
Now, when we look at starseed children, I remember years ago there was a description floating around on the web about what a starseed child would look like. A hybrid, with the big forehead and all this. Is there a common description for them, or like you say, these other children that are aboard the ships are seeing these other children that look completely different from them? So is there a common description to tell if maybe your kid's a starseed child, or what?
Well, there's lots of different mixes as far as I can see. Often I'm told by those that go on board craft, if they see hybrids, often they may not have as much hair. They may have bigger eyes. There may be different colors or what have you, a different shape of the face or what have you. So I think that it goes with whatever they're mixed with which will be highlighted. But often they don't look quite human. There's something about them that makes, and also their energy is different. And that's another part of it as well. They'll say there's just something about their energy that didn't feel right or whatever. And there's certainly that a little bit with the ones that incarnate onto, planet Earth and a bit different and say, I'm a hybrid. Often they end up, because their energy is different, being bullied at school, because it's almost like the other children sense there's something just a bit too weird or different about them, and they can often get a hard time.
In your experience interviewing people, I've heard from other authors that have said that when these children go aboard the ships, that it's kind of like a romper room thing where they play games and they're doing stuff like that. Is that what you've heard and experienced?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're monitored, and they might be monitored with a number of these intelligences. It might be a mantis being, it might be a humanoid, it might be a grey or what have you. And often the children feel very connected to these intelligences. They feel very comfortable with them, and don't fear them at all. So it is very much like an ET kindergarten, if you like. But often they're also taken to see other planets. And I remember, as I say, this 8-year-old saying that she was taken to a planet and she was shown how to levitate, how to use her psychic abilities. So they're trained to work in that way. So that, when I ask many experiences, do you see energy or feel energy? Do you see balls of light? Do you see spirits or what have you? Do you get information just in your head without you consciously learning it, And many of them will also say they find themselves writing strange writing or scripts, or coming out with these different light languages or strange artwork as well. All of these, of course, are indicators that they're having contact. And this is how it manifests, because they're bringing codes in, they're bringing these languages in, they're bringing in the frequencies.
Do you think that there's a lot more contact with children than adults because eventually, disclosure? Because I mean, if the older generation is going to tend to be more afraid, whereas if they get them young and they start teaching them, their ways and stuff, when disclosure does happen, it won't be such a scary thing for everybody.
I think there is a very subtle disclosure going on. I'm not talking about the government disclosure, which is still just saying it's bright lights and they don't know where they come from, which is which is laughable.
Absolutely.
But the new kids coming in are very comfortable with the idea there are other intelligences out there and what have you. So they don't have a problem with it. What happens more with the adults is, and this is a statistic that's really important for your audiences, that when we did when we talked to this 4,000 with 600 questions and what have you, we found 75% of encounters are out of body. So, for a lot of people, it isn't a physical thing. A lot of the time, it is an out of body experience. So you don't remember that as much as you would do if it was your physical body. But these interactions may very well be going on very regularly, right up to, 70 or 80 years old or whatever. So it doesn't seem to stop. It might slow down depending on what their mission is or why they're here or whatever. But what is happening, and I wrote about that in The New Human, is these new generations are a lot more open and awake. So they sense more, they feel more. For example, they can see more of the visual spectrum. Their sense of touch is 5 times greater than the average. Their hearing, they're able to hear a greater range of sound, for example. But not only that, they're able to see more multidimensionally and are more receptive to operating, like they'll say they can communicate with animals, for example. They can communicate with plants. All these kind of what we'd see is extraordinary, to them is not extraordinary. It's part of what they are. It's the only reason they have a problem is because they get shut down in our third dimensional reality through the programming, education, science, religion. All say, you can't do that. That's crazy stuff. You've got to be normal. You've got to fit into this little box. And that's when I talked about, the fact that we've got these different kinds of upgraded children now, which is diagnosed as ADHD and Asperger's and autism, certain types of autism and dyslexia. They are actually often these new upgrades of children, not fully understood, a lot more multidimensionally aware, but they can't be as programmed into that limited 3D that we try to program them. And so that's why they can stay more awake and stay more aware.
When we talk about multiple dimensions, what type of dimensions are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the fact that there are multiple dimensions. There's parallel universes, different timelines.
Okay.
And it just keeps going. If you look at, the quantum hologram, I mean, there are so many things that science is now beginning to accept that can be part of our reality. And we're just talking about portals, for example. stargates and all this kind of thing. And children know about them. They'll often I remember one 13-year-old here in Australia saying to he'd actually drawn a portal outside the house and said, that's where the portal is, Nan. So the kids are even aware of things like that as well. That's what's so extraordinary, is their awareness and their understanding of this multidimensional reality that we exist in.
Well, I can attest to that. I mean, as a paranormal investigator, I've had countless cases involving little kids, who are so sensitive, and like you say, they're able to draw these different, I guess, portals, like you say, portals. I had one direct me to a closet. She says, "Hey, they're coming through there. There's 4 of them in there right now." And then, sure enough, I got that X-cam thing pointed in there. 4 sick people are sitting in the closet. So I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when you come in contact with one of these kids.
They're everywhere, Charlotte. That's the point. They're not just the odd one here and there, and they're rare. More and more, when the parents get in touch with me, I've worked with about 3,500 families, and many of them have got these children or whatever. They don't talk about it. They don't want to expose their kids necessarily to scrutiny and what have you. But they're across the globe. I can be talking to somebody in Europe, Norway. It could be Brazil. It could be Africa. They're everywhere, and they're coming in greater and greater numbers, and they call them indigos. But there's also those that are called crystals, children of light, golden children. There's a lot of different names. And what that really means is their energy field has a certain purpose. Like the indigos are kind of the spiritual warriors. They're here to change the system. They're here to challenge the system. And some come in as empaths, some come in as healers, and that's their energy field or whatever.
When you talk about healing, let's talk about that a little bit, about people being healed when they are aboard. What type of healings are we talking about? Are we talking about heart problems? Are we talking about back issues? What's been reported?
Look, it can be a whole range of things, from, heart conditions right through to, other conditions, whether or not it's, some mental illness or whether or not it's some physical illness. A lot depends. I'm just thinking of a particular unusual case, which was an energy worker in England that wrote to me, and she said that she had tried to heal. She'd been asked to heal this lady. She didn't know anything about ETs. She didn't know anything about that side of things whatsoever. And she said, and I couldn't get through. I couldn't get past a barrier that was there. She said it was due to one of these things recently that have been given to people. I won't say any more than that.
Right.
And she just couldn't heal, and she didn't know why it wasn't affected, because she was really good at an amazing healer. Which is the next thing she knows is this ET is standing right there. She'd never thought of aliens before. She'd never even thought, connected them to anything. She said both her and this lady were taken on board craft, and they actually did the procedure, the healing procedure, and brought them both back in. She couldn't get over the fact that she'd been on board a spaceship with this being and saw what they were doing. This lady that had the healing, a few days later, was perfectly well. And this lady that who was the healer then started to see more and more of these beings and realized that she'd had interactions all her life along with the children, but she had no idea prior to that she had any connection to them whatsoever. So, because sometimes they can come in different forms, and you won't necessarily realize. You may think they're your spirit guide, or your angel, because some people, if they're religious, may say, "Oh, well, that's my angel," where someone else may say, "Well, that's a light being." Just depends on your perspective and how you interpret things. So often that's where people don't realize they've often had connections with these intelligences, but interpreted it differently due to their beliefs or their understanding of that realm.
Do you think that, with all the people that have been involved in this, the contactees that have been involved with this, do you think that there's going to be more contactees coming forward now? Do you think they're still taking people?
I think it's completely changed from 20, 30 years ago, when everything seemed to be still very unusual, very rare, and still ridiculed in mainstream often as not. But there were still lots of people having stuff, but not knowing what it was or interpreting in a different way. Now people are starting to know what it is, so they're coming forward. And the difference is, many of them have said to me, I haven't talked about this for 20 years, 30 years, never thought I would, but now I feel like I've got to talk about it, or I've got to write about it. It's almost like there's a kind of protocol that when they reach a certain point in their lives, they have to, a timing thing perhaps, where they're saying, oh, I've got to write about it. I've got to share my story. And I believe disclosure is going to come from that, not far more than it is from the governments. More and more people are writing books, sharing their story right across the globe. And now seems to be an acceptance that there are all these people having these experiences. And it's become far more of the norm, a bit like astrology was sort of still laughed at, and people said, oh, you don't believe, that, do you, or whatever. And now people take astrology and things like numerology very, very seriously, because so I think there's been a big shift in openness that wasn't there 20, 30 years ago.
I agree. In fact, as a ghost hunter, I've been doing this for 18 years. And I remember when I first started doing it, when I used to go talk to a lot, like if I had to do a public place and I wanted to let people know I was filming and whatnot, and having to go in and explain to the people at City Hall, it was very awkward back then. To say, hey, yeah, we're ghost hunters. We're looking at this haunted building, it's allegedly haunted building. But over the years, like you say, there's more and more acceptance. And so now it's to the point now where it's like you can talk to anybody on the street about it, and they go, oh, yeah, I have a cousin whose house is haunted or whatever. So, yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it's coming, the more time it takes in the future, the more people accept it.
There has been a great shift. And interestingly, for some people, it started in 2012. Others, it's been since the last few years, and all the dramas that we've got on the planet seem to have activated a lot of people. And now, they will say to me 2 or 3 years ago, I'd have laughed at, I would never have said any of this. I'd have laughed. This is rubbish. This is a joke or whatever. And now they're opening up to the other realms. They're seeing or feeling presences. They're getting information coming in. They're doing all these different things. And they said, it's all changed in these last few years. So there's an exponential shift without question on this planet to do with who we are and where we're going in terms of consciousness.
What is one of the most interesting stories that you have heard? You don't have to give names or anything, but something that you've been told that really made you stop and go, wow.
Oh, there's a lot. But I will go back to, we were talking about the missing pregnancies. So that was a very profound story with one lady who had come from England with her 2 children. And the reason that she'd come was her son, the second one, she believed was a star seed. It was in his teens. But she said to me that she was pregnant with another one after she had him, and had been told by the doctor that you don't have any more, because if you do, you could die, because the other one was nearly stillborn. And she still hadn't made up her mind whether or not to go ahead with the pregnancy. And she had this experience one night where she woke up the next day and there was no pregnancy, all gone. No way of knowing where it had gone, and didn't know what to think of it. But she had little snapshots, flashbacks of this baby being taken. To cut a long story short, the hypnosis was very profound, and it was very, very emotional, because she wanted to find out ultimately, because her son, that was her second son, said, my brother's there, he's on the ship. And she said, the evil aliens, they took him, how dare they, and all the rest of it. She had no proof or anything, but she wanted finally to get answers. So I did a hypnosis with her. I mean, it was very, very emotional, where she saw, literally in hypnosis, herself being taken up on board craft. She was taken to a place where they actually removed the baby, the fetus, and put it in a special place. And then we said, well, I said, now you need to find out why this was. And she recounted, it was so profound. She said to this being that was in front of her, who was telling her exactly what the doctor had said: if you go ahead and have this pregnancy, you probably won't survive it. So you have to understand the risk if you have it on planet Earth, basically. But you can have it here, and we can look after it. And she says, and she's in tears by this time, she said, well, promise me you'll look after him and you'll take care of him and that you'll love him. So she was trying to say, make sure that you'll do the very best for him. And the beings agreed. And the next thing she's shown in front of her eyes, this little 11-year-old with a missing tooth and long hair saying, hi, Mum. And it was quite, I can't explain to you how profound that was, because she'd always believed it was against her will and they'd taken this child and whatever. But basically, it was an agreement. And she had it verified by the doctor that she wouldn't have survived. And since that time, she said something really beautiful. The postscript of that was that when she was writing about her other son who'd had experiences, she says, when she gets stuck sometimes, this being, her son, would come in and give her a hand and help her to know what to say. And she called him Nathan, but he would come in and she would feel him and he would talk to her. Now, that's not what you expect with missing pregnancies, isn't it?
Oh, no, that's incredible.
Totally profound. And it was so incredible because she'd gone for years blaming the ETs, saying they were evil. They'd taken her son. And she couldn't even look at babies because it triggered her so much because of what happened. So there's things you don't expect.
Right. I know I interviewed one gentleman here on the show who was an older gentleman, and he said that he had around 14 children that he knew of on the ship. And he said in this one occurrence that when they came, because at one point they were coming rather frequently for him.
Yeah.
And he said he saw a girl of about 16, 17 standing in his yard. And right away he felt a connection to her and knew it was his daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one that was very similar of a flight attendant in Brazil who wrote to me. And she said that she'd had these visits when she was a young woman of this kind of feline being that she felt very comfortable with, but still had no more memory of that. And she said she was in a hotel seeing this little what looked like about an 11-year-old child standing there quite alone. And she went up to this child to find out where the mother was because she thought the child was lost. When the child turned round, it was part human, part feline. And she literally ran away from her. She's saying, this is a monster. And it wasn't until she was later, when she was taken on board the craft and had her memory, she saw that this was one of her hybrid children who'd actually come down and was physical in the hotel corridor. And she found out not just that her youngest child, who was 6 at the time, she saw on board craft talking to her hybrid sister telepathically. And she actually saw that. So she'd got a hybrid on board craft and a hybrid daughter who was physical in the physical, having literally a conversation and what have you. I mean, it just blows your mind. It really does.
It does. Now I'm thinking while you're telling me this too about the fear. You know that adults tend to be more fearful of this than the kids do, and I guess that's just normal kid stuff. Because kids, they don't have the. I don't know if they don't have the emotions, but they don't see stuff the way we do.
I think in many cases the children learn the fear of the parents. If their experiences are not fearful and they feel comfortable with them, there's no reason for them generally to have the fear. It's often the parents that are saying and explaining how they fear, what have you, because it's an unknown. And if you've only got limited memory, you're inclined to interpret often through that fear because you don't remember what you don't remember. And I was working with a lady in her 60s, and I always remember she'd gone with her whole family, been taken up on a craft, her daughter and her grandsons. And she was absolutely terrified of what she was going to find. But she wanted to finally find out what had been going on through her life, because she'd been in fear literally all through her life. And so I said to her in hypnosis, go to the origin of your fear, not the craft going up with all the kids and the daughter, but the origin, where her fears manifested. She went right back to when she was 2 or 3 years old in the cot. And she was in the cot and she was looking up and she saw 2 of these mantis-like beings. And she said, I said, did they hurt you? She said, no, they were just observing me. So I said, so they didn't hurt you? No, it just scared me to see these two strange beings, as a little child. So the fear had come simply because they were unusual and strange, not because they'd hurt her. And so all the fear that she'd had all through her life just left, because she realized they'd been helping her all the way through her life and they'd never hurt her at all. So it was that one time where she didn't understand and got scared. So sometimes when people have the fear, once they explore it, they realize that the fear may come from what they thought may happen or could have happened, not necessarily what really did happen.
Another question I have that's been going through my mind during this interview is, when people come back from these tests that they're getting, and like you say, some are healed, their illnesses. For the other people that are being tested, do they feel anything? Is there any discomfort from the test that they've had, or do they just get up and feel normal the next day?
Well, some that will be aware something's happened. Sometimes there'll be little marks on their body or whatever. Sometimes there's 3 little triangular dots, or there might be a rash or whatever. Or they may feel uncomfortable, or they may feel just really tired, for a few days or what have you. But some have had really serious illnesses and have been cured of it. And Preston Dennett's written a wonderful book, 100 Documented Healings. And that was one of many. And it just shows you that there is so much more to this than we realize. And that in itself, when people say, well, they're all bad, I said, well, why would they bother to heal people unless a very important reason why they were doing that? And so for me, I think it's very limiting and limited to think or make judgments like that.
Now, going back to children aboard these ships, I have heard stories of children saying that they were actually taken to the cockpit and they've been able to fly these ships, where they have allowed them to do that. Have you heard stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. But I've also heard, and I can give you 2 examples of this, and I expect there's a lot more. When I was working with one young woman, she described that she was on board craft, but she wasn't in a human body. She was in a grey Zeta body as a scientist, and she was working as a scientist on board craft. And so I said to her, where's your human body? And she sort of pointed to one side. And I said, well, how do you get back to your human body? And she described a ball of light leaving the grey body and moving back into her human and reanimating her human body. And she's not the only one. And one was an 8-year-old who said that the mantis beings are his family, his ancestors. And he said when he goes on board craft sometimes in his human body, he evaporates into the mantid form for a time and then comes back into his human form. So sometimes I think what happens is they may go into another form or another container, avatar, whatever name, and maybe fly the craft. So not necessarily always in their human body.
Or I was just thinking, as you were saying that, maybe the oxygen mixture is different up there, or there's no oxygen at all, and they have to go into this other body in order to even survive up there.
Well, I think, what do we do when we can't, if we go underwater, we have to put on a suit to allow us to operate underwater and what have you. So it's a similar kind of thing. It may be the atmosphere doesn't allow for certain things, and they give us, and so there's an avatar waiting there for the soul to inhabit for a limited time to do the task. I mean, there's so much really that we don't know, Charlotte. We really just we're scratching the surface of something highly complex and very amazing.
What do you say to someone who thinks that they might be abducted, who might be involved, a contactee in all this, and they want to get their story out?
Well, I'd say honor first of all your experiences. If you do have still blank spots where your memory isn't so good of being a child, that's very classic. I have a questionnaire they're very welcome to, because there's things there you might not think are related but are patterns of experience. The more you understand, the more you seek understanding, the better you're going to feel about yourself and what's going on. I say find out, look into it. And the more you hear about other people's stories, the more that may just trigger more awareness in you. And if you feel like you want to write your story, go ahead and do it, because the only way we're going to get this planet and people in it to finally understand what's going on is for people like yourselves telling their story and owning their truth, because this is what it's all about.
Do you think a lot of it? I mean, like you say, the last 10 years, people are coming more and more forward with it because it's more of an everyday thing. But do you think there's still some fear there that holds people back from saying this stuff?
I think so. A lot depends on the family and, the relatives. And some people really are afraid of judgment. I remember a young adult Indian young man saying he was a starseed and knew he was. He said, but my countrymen and my relatives believe, that all these gods, we've got about 100 gods, he said, believe these are gods when I know they're extraterrestrials. He said, so I can't ever say to them, well, actually, they're not gods and you worship them. So for him, he couldn't say it because of the belief of those around him. And this happens with people that have maybe fundamentalist beliefs, or for example, whose parents are so entrenched in that belief, don't feel safe enough to come out and say, well, actually, that's not how I see myself. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't resonate. And I've had some even threaten to, end their lives because it makes it so difficult for them. So the isolation around that, if you're in an environment that doesn't accept your experience, is really very real and, and very hard.
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
Oh, continuing to do the work that I do, which is helping people connect the dots more and more, and getting involved more with understanding myself so I can help more people. So that's what I do. And, this is why I do these interviews with wonderful souls like yourself that help put this information out there, because without you, we don't get the information out, and it helps people enormously to feel more normal and to feel confident and to feel safe to tell their truth. So that's what I do it.
Well, absolutely. And that's what I always like to say about this show is that it's a learning experience on this show, because we're forever we're forever learning about things. It could be a familiar topic, but there's always something to learn, always. And getting the word out about this stuff, absolutely spread. If I could reach one person with this show that maybe had an experience that hasn't come forward yet, maybe they contact you or somebody else, I've done my job, as far as that goes. How can people find you?
Oh, just go on Google and Mary Rodwell, cern.com.au or maryrodwell.com.au, the alien lady, any of those. Facebook.
Alien lady.
Oh, yeah. Any of those will find me, and there's questionnaires on the website, and they can contact me then very easily.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I so appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Charlotte, and take care and look after yourself, because you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Maybe we can get you back on, later on in the year or something, and catch up with you.
Okay, that will be wonderful.
Right. All right, you have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was fascinating, and I love talking to people like her because I learned so much from them, and it was very, very educational. Tomorrow, please note in your schedules, we will be on at noon. Our good friend Mark Ollie is going to be on with us, and we're going to be talking about something a little different. We're going to be talking about King Arthur. He's got some interesting information about King Arthur that he wants to share with everyone. And so we've been planning this show for quite a while and doing it, and got sidetracked. Well, not sidetracked, but got to talking about the alien abduction stuff, that we talked about the last time when he was on the show. But this time we're definitely going to hit that King Arthur stuff, so that'll be tomorrow at noon Pacific for everybody. All right, I'm going to leave you with her information, her contact information, and make another quick announcement, and that we will be holding an event in March, and I'm putting that together right now. And as soon as I have all the details on that, I will be posting that here as well. But I want to thank everybody for coming. If you like the show, share it with 4 people. Look at where I'm at tonight. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated it, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're just trying to get the word out about our show. Let your relatives know and all that good stuff, because we're always looking for followers and subscribers. Okay, here we go. Here's her contact information, and I'll let you guys go back to your day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow at noon. So here we go. So you got some websites. You've got consciousnessandcontact.org, ACERN, ACERN.com.au, and she has a Facebook page at facebook.com/ACERN.co Australia. The books are The New Human and Awakening. And of course, you can get those at Amazon. And again, like she says, go ahead and Google her name, because that's how I found her. I just Googled away, and there she was. Poof. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, noon at Pacific, for Mark Ollie, and we're going to be talking King Arthur. Have a great evening, everybody. Done.